What inspired you to start your coffee roasting business?
Well, the short of the long is a lot like the Blues Brothers. Got a pack of cigarettes and a half a tank of gas and called by God. I was planning a church that met in bars, coffee shops, tattoo parlors. We were a homeless church. I had a leadership team of 20 plus people, and the whole model of show up to pay the pastor on a Sunday wasn't going to cut it. So I needed to become bivocational and was already living and working in coffee per se, meeting all of my team members there. And after praying about it and suffering a traumatic brain injury where I just kind of turned into a vegetable for a couple of years, I got 3 phone calls within 3 weeks uh, by individuals who were praying for us in our situation. And the first phone call, I got $20,000. The second phone call, 10, and the last 5, all unsolicited. So I called Sherman up and bought a SF6, had it shipped to the house, called him back once we uncrated it and said, well, how do you use it? And he goes, hell, son, I don't know. I just build them. And I was like, all right, Sherman, well, what's all this digital stuff? He said, I keep you from burning yourself. I said, you ain't got nothing else for me. And he said, I'll never forget it. He said 2 things. He said, if you call me back, I'm going to hang up on you. And then the second was charge charge the beans at 350, get the 410 minutes, you're going to roast good coffee. So kind of ordered a bunch of green coffee, ordered an SF6, got a bunch of the church planning guys to help me get it into the house, and started to roast coffee and kind of took to it like a duck to water.
What year was that? Do you remember?
When did we meet? It was probably 2 years before we met. 20,
2006, maybe?
yeah. So this was '04 when I got my first six. Had the big
Oh, okay.
old temperature gauge up on the throat. I
Yeah.
love that. And it broke, and I'm like, Sherm, I can't get my roaster to start. And he's like, well, get some baling wire and just stick it in between these 2 probes in the box. You'll be fine. And I bet you I ran that six for 2.5 years, 70,000 pounds of coffee with that piece of baling wire, making the jump so the roaster would come on. And then I needed a 25, and that's where we got into a conversation. Uh, I actually ended up buying that 25 from a company in Michigan, which I can't remember their name right now, but I needed to get it fixed and I needed a manual. So Bill, being the consummate salesperson, he was like, well, I can give you a manual, but you need to let me go over that machine, make sure it's safe to use and blah blah blah. So use 25 pounder plus a couple thousand extra, and I got a manual.
That 25 pounder needed work. It it
It was
needed some DLC.
it was rode hard and put up wet, but it was a great, great entry price.
Yeah.
And that's really how I got into coffee. And then palate was interesting. I didn't realize it, but through all of my journeys, I was able to really the olfactory and OG, no computers, just roasting, smelling, trying, tasting, time, temperature, sound, sight, smell, taste. It's kind of how I taught myself how to roast.
So you've been doing this now for 20 some odd years.
20 years this year, been roasting coffee.
What are some of the biggest challenges you faced over the last 2 decades?
I think for us, being in Watauga County or Boone, North Carolina, really small market, carving out a niche, For those of you that don't know me, I had a Mercedes Sprinter van that I had a jib boom put in it and a cage actually where I'd swing the 6 pounder out the back door, and I traveled to music festivals and farmers markets everywhere, roasting on site, two group espresso machine, pour over, blah blah blah. The capacity to make a living as a bootstrapper has always really been a challenge because you don't you've got to have you've got cash flow, you got cash go. The thing that I'm learning still is how to keep cash stay. And when you don't have deep pockets, you're hand to mouth when you're buying, $100,000 worth of green coffee. It just takes money to make money, and we've never really had that opportunity to start with a full bank account. It was literally work with what was in your hand. A lot of hours. 70,000 pounds on a 6 pound machine. That is a long time to roast coffee on a 6 pound drum.
Well, I'll bet you're happy to get that 25 pounder when it finally came in
Yeah, there was a
into your.
little bit of fear and tribulation when I turned it on. I ran outside to see if I was blowing any fire up into the own zone, but boy, it made a difference. So, the technical stuff has always been pretty easy for me. The the market entry, I had a very unique mobile unit that allowed me to get started. I think when you're not necessarily a mid guy, you're kind of like a startup or a closer. I had to train myself. Well, this is what I tell everybody. It's a whole lot of fun making babies, and then it turns out to be a whole lot of work when they come into the world. And you've got to feed them. You got to help them grow. You got to take care of them. And I think a lot of coffee roasters get caught up in uh, the excitement of starting a roasting business, and then they realize that, man, it's just a lot of damn work. I mean, it takes relentless execution to get it done. And that was a challenge for me to learn that being a creative.
Tell us a little bit about your journey on sourcing green beans, how you started, and how that has evolved over time. Some of your, you know, I'm sure that your qualifications of what makes a good coffee changed and evolved during those 2 decades.
Well, we had some core values that we worked off of from the very beginning. It needed to be, eco-friendly coffee. So that kind of steered me away from non-organic pesticide coffee and really started with Royal New York and Andrew. kind of kind of got involved with him and did a lot of sampling and did a lot of roasting. And then eventually I've ended up, since I am bilingual, lived in Mexico for 3 years, worked with genocide survivors in Rwanda, and get in a little deeper into the communities of what I'm looking for in a particular coffee from Guatemala or Ethiopia. Just picked up an amazing Sadama from Wast from Moi, a young man who is trying to make a difference in the supply chain. So it's a constant digging and vetting continually. Um, Brokers don't want you to do that. They want to get you on forward contracts to where you can always be involved with them, and you end up getting on the hook, and a lot of comfort comes in to being able to buy green coffee, and you don't have to work real hard. And that's a great model, but it's not my model.
Now, over the last, again, 2 decades, you started out as a small roaster, finding your clients and so on. You've gone through challenges. I know that you went through a little fire
Little.
that eliminated your entire operation, and you grew up out of that, and you have what your operation is now. And how would you say talk about a little bit about the scaling progress that you would process that you went through, and how what were some of the challenges there, and how would you describe your entire operation right now?
Before the fire, up to 2016, I was primarily wholesale. So we were doing 500,000 wholesale in Watauga County. A lot of roasting, get up at 5, get it done by 12, go get it delivered. After the fire, it thanks to you and some others being able to go do Q grade and then actually through the SCA process of becoming an instructor for roasting. I decided that I really just wanted to carry coffees that I love. So for scalability, I started looking at online, downsized the wholesale operations because there were, when I came back into being after the fire, I was the third roaster in Boone, and then I became the 10th roaster in Boone. So there was a lot of people selling cheap coffee and getting their foot in the door while I was away, which is fine. Um, we have a retail location where I just ran the numbers and we've done 14,000 lattes last year out of it. So it's a real milk shop. The roastery is a little different. The roastery is where the magic happens. Um, we do a lot of training out of there. We did 4,000 pour overs last year out of the roastery with the Tone 3 machines. And so we liken the roastery to the Bourbon Trail. You don't go to Kentucky and go on the Bourbon Trail and ask for a Busch Light. You go and see the coffee roasted, you go and taste the coffee that was roasted, and there's a high component of education that is involved in the roastery as opposed to Blowing Rock, where it's mostly specialty coffee beverages, a lot of milk. Um, that scalability has worked for online. We definitely had our best year ever. I think we did close to 100,000 online, or maybe 99,910. Uh, it was real close. The roastery did really well, and given the fact that we had a hurricane, we lost 5 weeks, and then the counties started turning people away. It's been a rough year. We're down, but we've kind of our when people want a great cup of coffee, they come to me. But I've been doing it so long that they know, like when people gift coffee, they come to me. We just got in our state magazine, which was a huge win. It's a 300,000 person readership. And most of the people who read this magazine, if our state says go here, here, and here, people plan their vacations around that. So that was really exciting. The issue just came out last week. So scalability is multiple revenue streams, but sticking to your core values and guns. We're trying to do the most good with the least amount of harm in coffee, in our relationships, in our trainings, in our customer service, in everything.
You've touched on a couple of incidents, like the fire and so on. But can you describe a time when you had to innovate due to unexpected challenge? Like the fire was unexpected. I remember that, well, Western time, at 3:30 a.m. text I got from you. Now I saw the Great Wall of Fire there.
Yeah, boy, it got hot. I, the deeper, the thing that allows me to continue striving to be successful when I had the fire, I do not see myself as a coffee roaster. If you were to ask me what I do, I'll tell you what I do. If you're asking me who I am, my identity is not wrapped up in what I do. And so when the fire hit, I kind of prayed about it and just said, well, Lord, if this is the end of the run for us, then whatever the next thing that you're going to lead me to is going to be the next best thing that God has for me. But fortunately, it wasn't to get out of coffee. It was to move more vertically in the supply chain. So with the opportunity to pivot usually comes with big challenges. So you can either fold it up and quit, or you can look at the silver lining, which is what I did, and decided to look at, how can I be more vertically integrated into the supply chain? During the hurricane, we were down 5 weeks. It ripped, I mean, the whole bill, the water came through the roastery, like up 10 feet from the back where the pour over machines are, out the front door. Ripped the gas lines off, the caused a gigantic hole in the foundation. The building kind of tilted. Uh, we thought it was condemned, but we were able to get it back open. And during that time, we had the six that was on the cart. I got onto a podcast. They asked about how we were doing, and in 2 days, we sold $40,000 worth of coffee online. And we pivoted, roasting coffee on the porch, like old school, man. Just schlepping propane tanks up left and right to keep it going. Just God, such a butt ton of coffee. Um, because it wasn't our time. You learn how to adapt with the challenges. I mean, when I turned into a vegetable for 3 years, uh, that was the biggest challenge I've ever had to deal with in my life. Losing a business to a fire or having a hurricane come through. It's all about perspective, you know. Bad day is when you wake up and you don't know who you are and you don't know where you're at.
You've been there and done that. So someone's just wanting to start out and they just heard your story. What's the best takeaway that you can give them?
Don't get into coffee. Go into gin or brown water bourbon. Just trust me, so much easier. What's the takeaway? You got to know that you know that you know that you know. Then you've got to work within your gift set. I didn't, moving from a teaching background to coffee and then getting into coffee education, I realized that I have a very unique ability to communicate kind of complex theories into layman's terms. And so you got to know that you know that you know, and then you got to work within your gift set and stay within that gift set. And then you got to be faithful in the little. You can't deviate. Like I said, it's a whole lot of fun making babies. It's another thing when they hit the world. You got to work hard. You got to feed them. You got to be intentional about your movements, and that's the part that I've learned, and I've seen a lot of people fail at in developing a coffee roasting business. They try to keep up with somebody else and they don't do them. The greatest thing you can do is to do you and to do more of you. That's another thing I tell people.
So do you and then do more of you.
Yeah, pretty much. And while you're doing you, deliver high value to not only the customer, but the company.
I know you do a lot of training. Let's take a second. I want you to tell me about the training that you do, your style of training, and you touched on it briefly on what you bring to the table with training. But people want to come and they want to learn how to roast coffee. They want to learn how to run their business. Tell me what that looks like.
Well, that is we kind of it's we don't do it like everybody else. Um, what I like to do when I'm in the conversational mode of trying to understand uh, what an individual wants out of the training, what I'm trying to do is pull out their story and hear how I can dress up their idea and put shoes on it and get it to work. I found that the when I was teaching at the SCA, it was super cool, no regrets, but it was really a canned content course, and it had to be canned because individuals were there that they paid money to get their, roasting foundation certificate number one. They that's a lot different than somebody coming up with 24, 25,000 when they got to figure out, can I make money on this? What's my return on my investment? And so for me, what I like to do is figure out where they want to go. Then I want to help them get there. by not only teaching them how to roast, but helping them to understand what is their business value proposition, what helps them, what makes them get up in the morning, why do they want to roast? And I call it my build a box strategy, where you tell me what your objectives are, and we will build a curriculum around that for 2 days so that we can help you get to where you need to be. Now, there are two things that are always involved in that process. One is time on a commercial drum, and all my coaching's one-on-one. I don't do groups. And two, a lot of time on sensory training. If you can't if you can't tell what's going on in the roasting and in the dryer, and then in the cup, you can't really, you got to be able to roast coffee. You got to know what coffee should taste like, and if you've got to do a mid-course correction, you have the tools there. We don't use any computer, so we're just really the art of pen and paper, or pencil and paper, where we do manual data logging, and then we taste that coffee all the way through. So and then we do a lot of olfactory training. In between those two times, what I find the greatest benefit and the blessing for me is to see the lights go on when somebody is really dialing in a super laser focused plan. Like, I just got a call today. Somebody was like, "Hey, I want to start a coffee roasting business." Well, I'm going to call them back and say, "Why? Why do you want to start a coffee roasting business?" And if they say, "Well, I think it's a good idea," I'll be like, "Okay, that's awesome. But tell me why you want to start a coffee roasting business. What's in your heart? Is it to develop community? Is it to give back to your community? Is it to empower coffee growing communities instead of exploiting them?" So that whole personal touch of life coach, strategy coach, coffee roasting coach is what I put into the build the box. And we've done, I don't know, I think I've coached over 100 people since 2016. And I can only think of two of them that aren't in business. So I take very seriously their what they need to succeed is the forefront of my thinking when I'm dealing with an individual. So that's why I mean, I can offer canned classes, and that's fine. It's great for certifications, but the majority of the people that I've run into, they want to know, how am I gonna feed my family? How did you feed your family? What does a startup look like in a van? What does it startup look like when you can only buy X amount of coffee? Where do you buy it from? If you only got X, do you buy a SFR? I tell them, if they don't spend the money on an SFR now, they're going to spend the money on an SFR later. It's just the brutal nature of that decision making progress. So it's very hands-on. I mean, I spent one whole coaching session just helping helping a company figure out the why. Because if you don't have the why, you ain't gonna get up to do the what. That's for sure. If you're not bone deep marrow convinced in your heart of hearts that this is what you're going to be doing, you will have challenges, you will have setbacks, there will be obstacles, and it's real easy to quit when you don't have that conviction. So that's how I kind of, and a lot of that was what we talked about, Bill, back in the day. A
Yeah.
course for roasters built by roasters.
Don, I
Makes
got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
If there was one thing, just one thing that you would do differently that you know from all your experience in roasting, and with that experience, those years of experience, you could look back, turn that clock back and set and do something different that you knew now would have been the right decision, what might that be?
Honestly, I am my biggest bottleneck. Great question. What I know now, if I could go back to a younger Don, I would tell that younger Don, you got to make sure you tell the story and let people know your why. Uh, I was just always head down behind a 6 pound drum and then a 25-pound drum roasting. And people really love the coffee. But when you name your company Bald Guy, uh, people want to ask the bald guy a lot of questions, and I needed to be more available for them. I needed to let them into the why, which I'm doing a better job now. But I really sucked big time in marketing and in communication. I mean, just because I was doing all wholesale, so there was no real need when you're doing a 500,000 wholesale to tell people the why, because it was the customers going to the restaurant saying, "Hey, carry Bald Guy." So I had these brand evangelists out there because of what happened in their palate, and they thought we were super cool. Um, but I've been called a lot of things in my life, and probably the nicest way to sum it up would be a curmudgeon. I did have somebody tell me that I was the nicest a-hole they've ever met. So, um, I really failed miserably I had it all in my heart, but I was so focused on trying to make money that I didn't bring the story along with the volume. I could have done it. I wouldn't be where I'm at now. I'd be 10 times further ahead, Joe, if I had that marketing piece and that story out there on the website, the social media, the videos, the how-tos. Um, I failed miserably at that. I have no regrets for anything that I've done, but I'm Boone's best kept secret, and I've been here 20 years.
Well, there's an old saying that stories sell, right?
Yeah.
And had you known how to tell a better story back then, maybe the sales would have been a little bit bigger. Or
Well, and that would have been able to free up and train. It all comes down to that. I'm the bottleneck. I was roasting the coffee, bagging the coffee, driving the coffee everywhere to make as much money as I could. So I didn't have a a bookkeeper. I didn't have somebody that I was training. I didn't have a delivery person because I was just so hamster wheel stuck in this horrible grind. Whereas if I really would have been able to tell the story, sell the story, gosh, man, we would be really something on the East Coast. I'm really spending a lot more time in higher fruit. I'm doing a lot of content creation based on our content pillars, telling the story. I'm on podcasts. We're getting really 2025 is going to be a great year so that people can have an inside look into what makes Bald Guy tick. The tendency for people who do is you fall back down and you do the low hanging fruit. My goal now, since I have a team, I've got somebody over the roastery and somebody over the retail, is to go after that higher hanging fruit and then discipline myself, like hold every thought captive. I got the coolest little thing that screams at me. It's a it's a 60-minute block. I literally have to turn this on, turn everything else off, so I can just jam for 60 minutes. So I'm having to learn how to create and focus with a disability too. That was part of the problem. I just didn't have the mental bandwidth I had to do one or the other. But now I've got the systems in place. So zero systems maybe were in place.
That's about all I got. I want to thank you for your time. All right, Don, I'll let you go. Thanks for your
Y'all take
time.
care. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night. Appreciate you.
Okay, we'll see you. Bye.